Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're pleased to have as our guest, Scott Philiben, CEO of CIES Corp. Scott, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, I'd love to start off with a question about your background. How did you end up at CIES?
I grew up in aviation. My dad was aircraft mechanic, working at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. The playground that I used to have on the weekend was hanging out in derelict transport aircraft on the edge of the runway, which O'Hare seemed to accumulate. So I've never, as I point out to people, I never quite reached escape velocity. Um, though I tried. In college, I studied welding, weld design, as well as um, aerodynamics. But when I when I matriculated from the University of Wisconsin, I was destined to go work in warehousing and automated robotic warehousing as it was in the early 80s. And there was a sudden downturn. And my dad, sick of seeing me hanging around the house, found me a job at a local company building components for business aircraft. And from that point, as we talked about earlier, my first significant project was designing in 1985 the world's first and now only successful airline trash compactor. Um, Neat
Quite a
experience.
claim to fame.
Yeah, it's every international flight I wander into the galley. I check it out. It's electronics are significantly upgraded, but it's still the same design, still the same function, still the same interesting containers that I chose to use. It's pretty neat. It was a pretty neat, comprehensive project, and from that, I ended up working at Gulfstream and doing corporate aircraft interiors from the structural side, and then doing lots of different mods. I mean, lots of things at that time where it's really what the CEO wanted. Got to meet a lot of very interesting people. All of the luminaries that you would have read or read about, in the 1980s and 90s, I had a personal relationship with mostly to get their aircraft interior to their particular tastes and desires. Um, and
Sure,
met
you
a
have
lot of
plenty of
it.
stories there.
Oh God, yeah. That's that's sort of the reason, or one element of the reason I ended up in Bend is that yeah, I wasn't listen to people talk about running away after college and being a ski bum for a year or two, and it was one of those deals that you could capture my attention at any party if you mentioned that you had done that, and just something. Who was it was one of the CEOs, one of the famous CEOs of the 80s was in my office, and someone had done something to the airplane, not related to me, but I was there on a Sunday, and he proceeded to walk into my very small office and tell me I wasn't going to have a job in aviation. And, being Sunday afternoon, I stood up and left the room and walked out the door while I was working on the repair that was necessary to fix what someone had screwed up. It was sort of a watershed moment where, why don't I do the things I want to do? And I moved to Bend and helped out a small company, family-owned company, grow to 20 million in revenue. And during the 2007, 2008 downturn, not being a family member, and the lowering tide exposes a lot of barnacles. Decided I'd take the opportunity to head out on my own and form CIES.
Nice. Well, that's quite a story. I'm wondering what's the craziest request you got for an interior of a plane while you were working at Gulfstream?
Getting a rowing machine broken down, made of aluminum, so that the CEO of AIG could use it to exercise on his way to getting new contracts in the newly opened Russian uh, business element for the products the insurance products AIG was selling. Um, and it was trying to break this rowing machine, full rowing machine, down into component parts that could actually be stored in the aircraft, assembled, locked into the floor tracks, and avoid all the fancy furniture and gold fittings that were also part of his airplane. He was probably one of the most challenging people that I ever dealt with, and one of the most engaging. He was really, really an interesting person to interface with. Very locked down, very had all his reading material in order on his desk in what he wanted to read, do, and write. His his life was very regimented. Weirdly, he told me that his son was going to cause the downturn that we all felt in the economy due to the futures and the trading in multiples. I heard that from him from Ian sitting there. It was so weird that watch it happen right in front of me.
So tell me some more about the company. Like, I was wondering if you could give a thumbnail sketch. What are some of the key products, services you offer, in the market you're serving?
Yeah, no, definitely. We're really an embedded software, a high-end FAA approved software interface, to uh, software driven mechanical components. And so we started out where Cirrus Aircraft asked us if we would solve fuel quantity in small aircraft. And that was a challenge. I mean, every human being on this planet knows that fuel measurement in small aircraft is a problem, mainly because it's a Hollywood meme, really. Every aircraft you've seen in a movie and they've got a problem and the engine is coughing, the next thing you see someone do is tap on the fuel gauge. Everyone's seen it. It's so old from that standpoint that it's just a Hollywood meme that you can't measure fuel accurately in the aircraft, or you'll need to tap on the gauge in order to make it work, even though the sputtering engine's telling you all you really need to know. And it's a complex problem. It's interesting that most fuel quantity is solved with, a very simple resistive unit and, the combination of baffles and automobiles. In the aircraft environment, the fuel is quite dynamic. It's moving around quite aggressively. It's also splashing and moving back and forth, hitting the ribs internally in the tank. It's a quite dynamic environment. So it really took a matter of, basically built a simulated wing out of plexiglass, put it on a boat, evaluated this event, and came up basically with a methodology of obtaining some relative physical average of where the fuel was, and then quite a bit of horsepower in the software to resolve this to a usable value. And that's really how we started. And now, in aircraft below, from small business jets on down, we own 99% of the new aircraft market around the world. We're on all sorts of aircraft trainers, Small jets, really have defined and carved a niche for ourselves. Our solution is very simple looking. It's very reliable. Our mean time to failure is over 90,000 hours, or 3 times the average airliner life. And we did a program for Virgin Galactic on their mothership, and in their evaluation, we were the most accurate fuel sender that they could get to put on that platform. So, um, from that, we've branched out into other angular position sensing, like throttles for electric aircraft, or some of the new urban air mobility that's on the horizon. We've worked into flight controls, in controlling position, both in the cockpit and on the aircraft itself. And then we're now working on angle of attack and have filed several patents, or at least one, related to aircraft stability from angle of attack, related to the dynamics of and the motion of fuel in the aircraft wing, which is, I think, will be a very compelling piece, so really a capstone on my career if I can make. We've made aviation safer through reporting fuel accurately, but I think this one has the opportunity of making aviation safer overall.
Wow. I mean, it's really incredible work that you all are doing, and so impactful. 99% of the market for smaller aircraft, and also expanding into space related applications as well. Um, so in all of that, it seems like, the sky's the limit, pun intended, in terms of, the future of the company. And what keeps you up at night, if anything, at this point?
I we are very What keeps me up is we were not the darling of tech and involvement in funding rounds and the stuff related that the tech industry is really founded on. There wasn't really a following, and what always keeps me awake at night is there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, but always having to be careful, because we are self-funded and self-growing, to live within our means, basically. We have the capability of growing. We're now in a good position to take very good external funding, and trying to do things that allow us to grow in a relatively controlled manner. It's important in aviation. You can grab the brass ring, but you're always thinking and that you want to be doing things accurately, safely, with a large degree of control. And even though an opportunity may show up, um, and it may be exciting, that keeps me awake is the little gremlin that sits on my shoulder and says, there's going to be some hard work involved in order to get this done correctly and right.
And I'm wondering, in terms of building the company in Bend, so you were drawn to this idea, kind of a romantic one of, kind of moving, starting anew, a beautiful place, beautiful environment, really high quality of life. Um, what are some of the things that have really jumped out at you over the years in building a company in Bend? Where if you were talking to another entrepreneur, what would you say? Would you recommend, hey, these are the reasons why you need to build a company in Bend?
Yeah, I was originally, sort of soured on the idea. Bend was pretty much, when I was here, a small community, but my business was far away, and I kind of exploited that and did a lot of work in the South Pacific, probably kind of extending that whole idea of moving to Bend for lifestyle, and then going, oh well, this is good. I think more is better.
Yep.
But the Bend community really at that point was pretty moribund from a standpoint of tech. Aviation was growing, pharmaceuticals, is a big component here, but really, the town was growing by just growing, which, meant a lot of contractors and places for contractors, and the city was really, oriented towards that industry. Um, and it's just recently where we've all started getting together, actually through Technology Association of Oregon, and started a little bit of collaboration around here. I felt like we were when I started, especially with the former company, we were really trying hard to, get the tech people together in town. There were several efforts to do that, and we put together a few people, a few consultants that I used to help us out along the way, but that has grown exponentially, with, distance work. There's opportunities and people in Bend, that were not available, and there's some interesting people, doing different things that we're now starting to put together, that the sinews of something that could extend, in what I'm doing, and then um, there's a certain amount of AI processing, for the idea of angle of attack and fluid motion. Those are some really huge, complex problems, and using techniques like AI can sort of sort the wheat from the chaff, so to say. And there's some people providing insight here in town. Um, I would I would cautiously recommend it for tech and doing something that's, sort of low key production. I would say that's true of the pharma people here because they're basically qualifying processes. Um, Bend is good for the ability to learn, well, move into larger manufacturing. It's difficult here. The infrastructure is really I lament the fact every time I see a new building put up, it's a set of studios so that contractors can move in and operate a tile business or a framing business or a cabinet shop, and not really the opportunities I see in larger cities like Portland, where industrial space is there, where you could really grow a larger industrial footprint. That is the missing component in Ben, but the talent here right now is very interesting, very compelling. We 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 reach out regularly in discussions with people and try to get community involvement as much as we can in the tech community, because there is so much of what people are doing that can have implications for other applications of technology, whether it's information or whether it's physical things like we build. Um, everybody's really It's quite interesting group of people.
Yeah, it's one thing that struck me too about your observations there is that it wasn't until more recent years that we started to see again greater growth in biotech in particular. And you had Bend Research there for a long time, but it was seen as kind of a little bit of an anomaly. And
Uh
then
huh.
a lot of that talent started to grow new businesses, right? And new businesses expanded into the area. And then some of the manufacturing too that has taken root. And I think in tech, at least, a lot of folks tend to view Bend as a lot of remote software engineers and salespeople for tech companies located elsewhere and maybe some investors.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to your point. And with things like the innovation district underway and opportunities to look at more kind of place-based economic development, do you see opportunities to expand some of the amenities for companies like yours that are building things too?
I do. I see, sort of a retraction in in what's going on. The aviation industry here is quite robust, and then now we have a lot of former engineers that were working at Columbia and Epic are now working for Joby down in the Bay Area, and doing work, on the urban mobility market. There's still a very active aviation community here. There's some new rules that just were put in place that allow a more freer design for aircraft that are lightweight and smaller, don't carry as many people. The FAA is projecting that they'll back off of the requirements and let people move forward. Um, that's going to happen. The pharmaceutical industry, which surrounds me here at our facility, is very active, very dynamic, very uh, and very progressive. It's uh, Saran here, which is an offshoot of Bend Research, is exploding in capability and what they're doing. Uh, the uh, the beer industry is taking a bit of a deal, but it also, it's really an element of some element of tech and getting, proper formulations and uniformity and all of the things that go into manufacturing beer. Um, the pharmaceutical stuff is kind of fun because I've heard conversations at Deschutes Brewery that kind of tie the two together. And while you would think, spray dried pharmaceuticals and, so you can make powders that would be different than beer. I've heard some engaging conversations and an exchange of concepts and ideas. Um,
I love it. That's great.
it,
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, but yeah, that these sort of elements, in fact, we're building, a new machine shop, and then on that same footprint, we've got another building going up for Saran. So, who are also interested in what we're doing in the machine shop and what they can get out of it. Yeah, it's a much more dynamic environment now, much more involved.
That's great. And as you look into the future, you mentioned a few things that are kind of interesting growth opportunities. One is ultralight aircraft, urban mobility solutions, and then also some of the work you're doing in terms of the space industry. Like of those, which do you see as kind of the more near term growth opportunities for the company?
For us, I think it's going to be the urban mobility market. The idea that there's certain retractions to people on smaller aircraft, and a lot of those are related to the dynamics of small aircraft, in that they're more susceptible to aircraft or air movements, which people respond to as sort of not a smooth flight. And the term puddle jumpers comes to mind, when you used to get on a small aircraft to come to Bend. That's changed dramatically in that we no longer have puddle jumpers coming to Bend. But, the work that I'm on and the work that I know our industry is going to, and this whole urban mobility where you're getting into a vehicle, the size of a large or the size of a minivan, and you're going to go, 10, 20 minutes in one direction or another. And the stability of that and the idea that you might get in a small aircraft regularly into the future, I think is going to be a huge driver. Because as soon as you open up that Pandora's box, the idea that you might not have to live in Bend, or you might live in Montana and you might commute to your office in Portland, or you might decide, that the location is not so important as your mobility to get to a new location. And we're seeing it, and that personal aircraft may be a solution for you to be able to achieve that goal, especially as we make them more accessible, safer. We're all working towards that goal. And available, that in your head, that these things and processes are all more automated. We now see aircraft offered with auto land. If you can't land the aircraft will land itself. We're very close to seeing auto taxi. So after you've landed the aircraft, it's going to motivate itself off the runway and park itself in the proper location for you. We've had autopilot in aviation forever. Really, the last frontier is that it takes off all on its own, and that's its own problem. But we're not very far away from that either. So the idea that, well, you could learn to fly, but that the aircraft could really, for all intents and purposes, fly itself, is going to open up a lot of opportunity. There'll be a lot of people. Everybody, as a young child, has spread out their arms and made, engine noises and flown around the room. It's just we're going to be able to embrace that early childhood desire and turn it into something that's approachable for every person.
There is something about flight that definitely captures the imagination. As we start to wrap up a little bit, I'm wondering, what are some podcasts or books or anything else you've listened to recently, read, that you might recommend to our listeners?
It's like I was trying to think about that when we were talking about that, and I just consume, YouTube stuff on, especially lately, on AI and creating large language models for aircraft certification work,
Hmm.
which is working really well and reducing the burden, that not so much the rigor, but being able to put together, comprehensive safety documents for flight test work, or put together, and it's coming up. You had to load it with all the stuff that I've done over my very long career, but it's turning out really good work. And I'm trying to think. I belong to Vistage, and I get a monthly speaker, every month. And as anybody who's joined Vistage, that would be my recommendation for a method of just getting immersed into a new idea, whether it's from a marketing standpoint or technology standpoint, burgeoning, or dealing with uh, personnel issues that every company faces, or dealing with and how to manage change or people. That's probably been, I would say that's probably been the biggest contributor to my success, is just being a Vistage member and being force fed this stuff once a month. That's probably
No,
the
it's great.
best advice I could give.
It's almost like a behavior that has to be developed over time, and consistency matters with any new learned activity, right? So,
Yeah,
that's a great recommendation, and we have a number of members I know that have gotten a lot of benefit from Vistage groups over the years. So thank you for that.
yeah.
And as we wrap up, too, any final comments or sort of words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Don't dismiss aging entrepreneurs. Usually, we've lost all our money, and we're a hell of a lot more. It's a hell of a lot more critical to be successful. Yeah,
Love it.
yeah, you're you're it's very interesting that looking at a bleak retirement is one of the stronger motivations.
We got to get this one right, damn it.
Yeah, especially if you moved to Bend and then decided that helicopter skiing was something you should do every year. And so, yeah, your investment portfolio was rich in experience and and low on funds.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure chatting with you, Scott. Thanks again for taking some time to share your wisdom with us today.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.